have to fix the mic. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Linda Brent, and on behalf of the National Training and Simulation Association, I'd like to welcome you to the first special event of Itsec 2023. So welcome. The Modeling and Simulation Congressional Caucus was co-founded in 2005 by Congressman Bobby Scott, who you'll hear from in a moment. The purpose of the caucus is to strengthen the industry by growing capabilities through education and legislation. NTSA supports several events during the year in collaboration with the caucus to achieve its mission. Admiral Robb cared deeply about growing our industry, and as such, we continue to work closely with the caucus to advocate the strength of technology to improve human performance, save lives, and save money. So why are you here, and why is the caucus here, and why is it important? As you well know, a significant amount of the sales in this industry are from government agencies and organizations, the Department of Defense and just about every other government agency. This event is an opportunity, our opportunity, to learn firsthand about the issues that are important to our representatives and their reflection of their constituents. We know modeling and simulation. We know how it can solve problems. By learning about the issues our nation faces from our leaders, we can determine ways our technology can solve those problems. This helps them to determine as well the matches between the country's needs and what technology solves. This morning, we have a chance to hear from each of these leaders to discuss issues critical to them and to our nation's safety and security. Listen carefully to what they have to say and think about ways that we can help. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions to encourage dialogue about the match between our technology and the nation's needs. I will introduce each of them individually, and once they have each had the opportunity to share their views, we'll have an open discussion based on your questions. There are question cards on seats around you, so please fill out a card and pass it to the folks in the aisle, and they'll make sure that they get up here. So start your questions early. Today, we're represented by 3 members of the Modeling and Simulation Congressional Caucus. The first member I want to introduce is Congressman Bobby Scott. In 2005, he co-founded the caucus with the express intent to remain bipartisan, which it does to this day. He remains a stalwart supporter of this industry and sponsors and supports legislation each year in modeling and simulation. He has represented Virginia's 3rd congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives since 1993. Prior to his service in Congress, he served 15 years in the Virginia General Assembly. He also served in the Massachusetts National Guard and the United States Army Reserve. Ranking member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce, his 5th term as the committee's Democratic leader. In this role, he spearheaded critical parts of Congress's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, saving pensions, reducing the number of uninsured Americans, and created significant investments in K-12 education to reopen schools. He's a strong advocate for the Constitution and passionate in his quest to reform criminal justice and provide equitable and outstanding education for today's children and youth. Congressman Bobby Scott. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for your very kind introduction. It's more than generous. She's promoted me to the sole founder of the caucus, which is a real exaggeration because the founder was Randy Forbes, who was founding the caucus and was looking for a Democrat to make it bipartisan, and I was his neighboring congressman and said, Bobby, I need a favor. Can you sign up? And I said, well, what is it? Don't worry about it. And that gets you promoted to founder of the caucus. It's good to be here with my friends Jack Bergman and Representative Soto, Darren Soto. Darren represents this area, and so he obviously has a strong interest in modeling and simulation. Jack, I'm sure he'll tell you in his former life, actually attended this conference many times as his, so he knows more about this than anybody in the caucus. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. My district has a lot of interest in modeling and simulation, starting with VMASC, Virginia Modeling Analysis Simulation Center at Old Dominion University. The Eastern Virginia Medical School has a National Center for Collaboration in Medical Modeling and Simulation. Norfolk State has a Center for Excellence in Cybersecurity. Hampton University has a modeling and simulation program. Norfolk Naval Shipyard uses a lot of modeling and simulation. Thomas Jefferson Lab and military and military medic training is done at Joint Base Langley Eustis and at Portsmouth Naval Hospital. There are a lot of private organizations that use modeling and simulation. Newport News Shipyard, Huntington Ingalls Newport News Shipbuilding, where they are designing and building major ships, aircraft carriers and submarines using modeling and simulation. That not only does it more efficiently, but also saves a lot of money, and that is not lost on Congress when you can do something better and cheaper. And that's why we have been in infrastructure programs trying to insert modeling and simulation every time we possibly can. Most of the infrastructure laws we've passed in the last few years include an instruction to use modeling and simulation to better plan for traffic capacity, assess risk, ensure resiliency, and better inform large-scale projects. And so that we've been successful in that. The CHIPS and Science Act passed 2 years ago included instructions to use modeling and simulation in the supply chain. The Inflation Reduction Act includes instructions to use modeling and simulation to ensure clean energy, like offshore wind, which is should be designed by modeling and simulation to make sure that we get the best clean energy we possibly can. More recently, in this year, we're working to get ModSim, the modeling and simulation experts at VMASC and Eastern Virginia Medical School are asking that and we've been successful so far, but you never know what the appropriations process is going to look like in the end, to make sure that we have investments in telehealth, to make sure that we're using modeling and simulation. And we're delighted to have the Modeling and Simulation Caucus kickoff a few months ago talking about patient safety initiatives. Also honored to recognize an important milestone in higher education. We have now grants to improve modeling and simulation in higher education. That was established as part of the Higher Education Act in 2008, and it took them about a decade to get the first money out of Washington, but it's finally come. And in 2021, we had a few grants, and that was because by then, as Linda's indicated, I'd become chair of the committee, and so they had to listen, so whatever it takes. But this year, we had some more grants going out. We did some technical assistance and identified some other potential grantees, and this year's awardees include Old Dominion University, all politics is local, Clark State College in Ohio, University of Houston in Texas, University of Central Florida, Atlantic Atlanta University College in Puerto Rico, University of Maryland, California, Polytech State College in California, all got grants to improve their modeling and simulation. One of the things we're trying to ensure is that if you get a modeling and simulation degree in Florida and somebody else gets a modeling and simulation degree in Virginia, that somebody has some clue as to what they can do and to standardize the requirements and whatnot. That's one of the goals of that legislation. Finally, let me just say a word about workforce development. As you know, not much is getting done in Washington. It's very contentious, but the chair, I'm now ranking member of the committee, and I have been working together to try to do something constructive on workforce development. I think we're going to surprise some people. and actually do something. Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is the main funding for workforce job training in America, is up for reauthorization, and we've been working to get that reauthorized. We've been trying to get focus on youth, training vouchers for displaced and unemployed, codifying partnerships between employees, employers, and community colleges, and strengthening industry and sector partnerships to better meet the needs of both employers and job seekers. This would make modeling and simulation job training much more available. One initiative we had last year, we got it passed in the House, not the Senate, was the Apprenticeship Act, which would provide 1 million new apprenticeship opportunities and expand the sectors that you could use apprenticeships for, not just the traditional trades, but also healthcare, finance, and technology. And so that they're making sure those jobs are available there. And another important initiative we're working on, the use of Pell Grants for job training. Right now, Pell Grants can essentially only be used for courses that lead to a college degree. If all it leads to is a good job, can't use the Pell Grant. I think most people recognize that as ridiculous, and we're trying to make sure that Pell Grants can be used for quality job training programs. You don't want somebody to set up a little storefront operation, deal out worthless certificates, and take all the Pell Grant money. You want to make sure they're quality programs, and that is really if we can get that straight, I think we may be able to use that, and that would open the doors for many people to get job training that they can't afford right now. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you all for what you're doing for modeling and simulation, and in particularly as it involves job training. We look forward to the questions this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So next will be Congressman Darren Soto. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2016, representing Florida's 9th Congressional District, which actually borders the convention center where we are located right now. He started his career in private practice as an attorney in family law, real estate law, and civil litigation. He serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and also on Agriculture. His passions include advocating for the protection of our environment, disaster recovery, and emerging technologies as are represented by our industry. He has been a strong supporter of the caucus since his election to the House of Representatives, and we welcome you today, sir.
Thank you so much. And first, welcome all of you to Central Florida. Thank you for choosing Orlando continually for your convention. This is what we do in Central Florida. Our constituents work so hard to make sure that you have a good time, that where you're able to make family memories. I know a lot of you will be in a conference the whole time, but at least your families hopefully will be out there going to the theme parks, and I know that, I think we all know that, going to the theme parks and being able to enjoy yourselves. We're also home to one of the major modeling and simulation clusters at the University of Central Florida. Thank you, Representative Scott, and thank you, Representative Bergman, for your leadership on the grants. We were excited to get a $1 million grant for UCF for modeling and simulation. This cluster has been around for quite a while. When I was in the state legislature, we worked quite a bit on getting partnership buildings 2, 3, and 4 to really expand out the infrastructure we have. I want to thank all of you for what you do to help protect our troops, to help train them, and to make sure that we have readiness, and also to save money. That is more relevant now, or as relevant now as it ever has been. When I think about the UN and all the work we do in diplomacy to try to keep peace across the world, and yet every year we're reminded that there are threats facing both America and our allies. We saw with the invasion by Russia of Ukraine. We see it again with the attack by Hamas on Israel, how important the work you do is. Every time our constituents reading the paper about, well, we're sending humanitarian relief, we're sending military hardware, and we're doing training, right? Well, we know that's what you all are doing. We know that you all are the leaders in this room working with our military, including many of our military in the room. Let's give our military and our veterans a round of applause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your service. When I think about, for instance, javelins being used in Ukraine right now and the quick training it took to get the Ukrainian armed forces up and ready to be able to utilize that technology and so many other technologies that they weren't ready for. While the war is going on, it just shows how important the work you do is. We are excited not only to get the $1 million grant for simulation training, but our district also was able to secure a $289 million Cornerstone Award for aerospace microchips, and also we're excited to have STARCOM located at Cape Canaveral in Central Florida too, another way as we're working on simulation and training for war fighters in space. As far off as that sounds, we know that we need to protect both the home front here and up in space, whether it's for communications or for so many other needs, as we're increasingly seeing a presence from China and other rivals. And then when you look at the training that we're doing to help out the Israelis as they're facing an attack by Hamas, how quickly that happened, what a surprise it was, and how this industry is coming in to help so many of those folks. I couldn't be prouder of the work you're doing. So thank you all so much. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for choosing Central Florida.
Thank you, sir, for being here. And lastly, we have Congressman Jack Bergman. He stepped up early in his congressional career as one of the 4 co-chairs of the caucus. He serves the 1st District of Michigan, which includes the beautiful Upper Peninsula and a large portion of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, about 44% of the landmass of the state. He retired from the U.S. Marine Corps, rising to the rank of Lieutenant General, and had a second career of 22 years as a commercial airline pilot. Additionally, he started not 1, but 2 small businesses in medical technology. He is driven by service to others and to supporting and defending our Constitution. His passions include support of our military and those retired from the military. He believes in the power of technology to improve our nation's infrastructure and encourages the growth and development by empowering small business. Welcome, Congressman Bergman.
Thank you, Linda. Folks, it's great to be back with you. This is kind of like we figured out in our family as we schedule this time of the year. We have Thanksgiving, Itsec, and Christmas. That's how it works in the family scheduling. But I'm honored to be here with Representative Scott and Representative Soto because what you don't see, thanks to the media. By the way, who's here representing the media? Anybody? Raise your hand. Okay, if you are, I just want to please let the people know that Democrats and Republicans work together every day, all day in D.C. And we share coffee. We share maybe an adult beverage later in the day, but we're there to work for all of you. And it's not the craziness that you saw in middle school, okay? It is what it is. But it's on the media to show the American public. Now, how many of you, is this your first time here? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. And how many of you in the whole crowd have served at some point in uniform, whether it be military or law enforcement or whatever it happens to be? Okay. You know, we are blessed, especially for those of us who served in some way, shape, or form, to have had leaders that went before us that showed us what it meant to be a leader, what it meant to be an innovator, a visionary, and all that. And we lost one here not too long ago, Admiral Robb, rookie. And he, when you think about him, by the way, he's on cap right now. For those of you who know what that is, he's up looking down making sure that this conference is going as it should. But I've never seen a more relaxed but yet focused leader than an Admiral Robb as I got to know him over the past few years. And when you think about it, his time in naval aviation, he went from an environment where there was no simulation in the training to embracing the value of simulation when it came to training largely our naval aviators and others, but especially when he was still in uniform, to succeed in the fight with new technology that didn't even exist when he first got his wings and started flying. So when you think about the transition, the transformation he made as an individual to embrace a future that was not only plausible, but really achievable at high rates because of the changes and the advancements in everything from the basic technology to how we design and produce products and then how we get those products into systems that achieve the goals that we have. So we lost a giant, but again, I know he's with us in spirit. And last year he shared with me in front of a few folks the night before this that I guess it's a compliment. He all of a sudden, loud enough where everybody at the table could hear, he says, "You know, you're really a free spirit." And I said, "Well, yeah, what's your point?" He said, "Well, you make people nervous." I said, "And what's your point?" I said, I didn't come here to make it about me. I came here to get stuff done. That's what I was brought up with, the attitude I was brought up with as a kid. And that's, of course, as a Marine, we are, every service has its own culture. And the beauty of our military, whether you're the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Space Force, the Coast Guard, the Merchant Marine, all of those things, we need to show the young people who would consider joining a branch of the service to serve for a while, we need to show them really who we are and the stability of our culture and what that brings forward to us as a country, to include why you all are here. So I'm sure some of you know the term Five Eyes, intelligence sharing between certain countries. Well, I'm going to give you a little quick Five Eyes here that I adopted. And in this case, the I is for the letter I. The first I in Five Eyes is integrity. Did you ever hear yourself say about someone, well, they've got 60% integrity, or 80%, or 20%? No, you either have integrity or you don't. So everything starts with integrity. The second I is intent, because as you evaluate different things, what is the intention of that individual, that organization? The third I is innovation. And if you're going to put the word to the 80% level, not 100%, I'm a bell curve guy. To the 80% level, if you're going to use the word government and innovation in the same sentence, you probably have to include not. Okay? We're not. The government is supposed to provide an environment where the private sector and the research side of the government actually really gets stuff done. The fourth I is initiative. So once you got a good idea and you got the ball rolling, let's maintain the initiative. Well, when you really run up against the walls, the fifth I is intensity. How much will you put against what that ball you've set in motion to keep it in motion when life inevitably throws you a bureaucratic roadblock, a curveball, a delay, whatever it happens to be. But when you apply those five I's to what we're trying to do here, I believe that the challenge that we have as members of Congress is to ensure that we don't overburden you as innovators with unnecessary hoops to jump through, and those are largely bureaucracies that their job is to create hoops. And by the way, bureaucracies are not bad. A good bureaucracy keeps any entity from making big mistakes quickly, because a bureaucracy will take in an idea, churn it around a little bit, and then spit it out and move forward. Again, I believe in Washington, D.C., we are over bureaucratized, if you will, and it slows down my colleagues and I from getting good legislation and mostly policy, because that's where the real rubber meets the road in most cases, from getting done. And we know that with technology, and oh, by the way, we don't live in a very friendly world. I don't have to explain that. You know who's for us and who's against us, if you will. And when you think about the levels of security we have to have here today in this convention center to make sure that those who come with malintent to try to steal IP, to try to steal from us, this is serious business, folks. This is what you're doing and what you will continue to do. We will be ready to do what we have to do when we have to do it. And I guess our job is to make the government as good a partner for you as possible, because you're the brains. You're all of those things that we need to make sure that the United States of America maintains its status. Well, we didn't wish it on ourselves in the world, but we are there because we do the right thing for the right reason at the right time. And our allies count on us, and we're not going to let them down. So with that, I think we're going to go to questions.
Yes, we are.
Thank you
sir.
very much.
So the first couple questions actually touch on something that you mentioned, Congressman Bergman, but this question's open to all of you. Much of the congressional budgets and the presidential budgets are built around, especially in the DoD, silos of each service. How do you recommend balancing the building of service-specific silos of excellence with the demand for joint interoperability, and even beyond that, with the demand of now multinational coalitions? How do we deal with that? How do you recommend that we deal with that and balance that out? Anyone? Sir?
Well, I'll start. How about early retirements in the Pentagon? I'm serious, because think about it. All of you have a computer or a cell phone, okay? And if you've been at this for 40 or 50 years, and with the new technology, do you upgrade your cell phone or your computer yourself and figure it out? Or do you call some youngster who does it, they can do it in their sleep? Now, these silos, by the way, my budget for my last command, which was 2005 to 2009, was about $955 million a year. That was my budget. And I worked on the POM inside the Pentagon with the Marine Corps side of things. So I've been involved in building it. It was fanciful at best. And so how do we begin to do that? I think we have to take an honest look. I don't care whether you're DOD, whether you're DHS, whether you pick your three-letter entity, is the weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, of your organization causing an extreme weight, W-A-I-T, for the end users? Because the question is, how do we get the technology from its incubation stage to the shooter, or to the whoever you want to call it, that person that's going to be utilizing the technology? We're, to use a term that maybe makes people feel uncomfortable, and I'll just speak with DOD, we're obese. And that's not healthy for anybody.
Congressman Soto?
We have a lot of both large and small contractors in the space. I think it makes sense where we can have a common platform, common operating system, common terms, while knowing that applications are going to be very different if you're training to be in a nuclear sub versus being a field medic to flying a helicopter. So to the extent that we can have more common operating systems that are interoperable as well as common terms are maybe a continued way we could get efficiencies, and with our allies as well. And I know that is a challenge because of having so many contractors in this space, but that would be one way to get some efficiencies.
Okay.
I'd just say that the Armed Services Committee needs to work on it. It's not easy, and there are a lot of complicating factors, not the least of which is, as Darren mentioned, there are a lot of subcontractors. We got a lot of subcontractors in everybody's district, and people look to see if you're going to change something, what's that going to do? You don't want to eliminate a subcontractor in my district, and that complicates a lot. It's going to be hard to get around that, but the committee's got to work on getting taking care of the silos.
Okay. There are a number of questions on artificial intelligence, AI. What do you see as its future? What are some of the risks associated with our national security, cybersecurity, those kinds of things? What impacts do you think it might have in the future of modeling and simulation? So in general, comments on, and perhaps on the ethics of AI as well. Comments relative to that. Who'd like to start? Congressman Soto?
One, we have to go boldly forth and make sure we're designing more advanced AI than countries that don't share our values, because it could be used against us. We are working on a lot of these issues in the Energy and Commerce Committee. For instance, I'm working on issues to allow the FTC to be able to use AI to review fraud and products that cause injuries on the internet. But we've worked on a couple amendments to get into the defense budget for the last 5 or 6 years to encourage different branches to utilize AI more. And I could see for a lot of the training, you could get it to be more realistic and the reactions to be more in real time by having artificial intelligence used in this space. But the key limitations of AI, and I think everybody understands this, is it's only as productive as the data sets that are included. So for those of you who are working to establish different scenarios in modeling and simulation, having fidelity in the initial data sets is going to be a key part of making sure that these real-world situations are more accurate. Locally, I got to see with our local St. Cloud Police different scenarios that they're working on with AI, and now it's not. When I was going to these programs 10, 15 years ago, it looked more cartoonish and it looked more like you weren't in real life, and now these are scenarios where that's an individual who looks exactly like you're standing there with them, and the responses are such that they really step up the person's ability to have to react. So I think all those things are going to be helpful.
Congressman Scott?
I think Dick Cheney talked about known knowns, known unknowns. I think we're in the unknown area with artificial intelligence. There are too many things that we don't know and really don't know what we don't know. In commercial applications, people are going to be running far ahead of whatever Congress can catch up with, and trying to regulate this is going to be a challenge. There are a number of meetings we've been having, about one a week, with something to do with artificial intelligence, committee hearings, to try to figure out what these unknowns are. But we'd hope for some help.
There has to be, anybody here remember who Hal was? 2001 Space Odyssey. There has to be a moral equivalent piece of AI. And without that, Not too much scares me. That scares me. It really does. And when we cease to be a nation that looks up for the initial guidance that we get in anything, we put ourselves at extreme risk regardless of where that risk comes from. So I believe that it is incumbent upon the Congress to take that into account at the highest levels to make sure that we don't lose that moral side of the future.
Okay. Well, this is on the hearts and minds of many people in the room, so I'll just get it out there and ask the elephant in the room. Any chance of passing a balanced budget this year?
Balanced budget. No.
Well, go ahead, Bobby.
Well, I think we need to be serious about budgeting. You can talk about fiscal responsibility, or you can actually do fiscal responsibility. One of the things is you have to follow the fundamental principles of arithmetic. We have, under Democratic leadership in the House, there's a rule that you have what's called pay-go. If you have a new spending program, you got to pay for it. You either got to raise some taxes or cut another program. If you cut some taxes, you got to pay for it. You either got to cut some programs or raise somebody else's taxes. We have pay-go. We're now under a situation where we have, I don't know what they call it, but it's half pay-go. If you have a new spending program, you got to pay for it, taxes or spending cuts. If you have tax cuts, you don't have to pay for it. As if a tax cut doesn't affect the budget. And I think if we first of all get serious about just the arithmetic, we could solve a lot of problems. I got to give it to the Republicans. They're much better talking about the budget than Democrats are. I've been on the floor of the House listening to the Republicans talk about the budget and listening to Democrats talking about the budget, and I'm convinced that just listening to the debate, Republicans have a better position. But every Democratic administration, presidential administration, since Kennedy, has left for their Republican successors a better deficit situation than they inherited, without exception. Every Republican since Nixon administration has left for the Democrats a worse deficit situation, without exception. And Trump was on the way to doing that before the pandemic. So I mean, I think we have to get serious about budgeting. It can be done. I got elected in 1992. When in 1993, Clinton's budget came up, and when he left office, he left with a surplus and enough surplus to pay off the entire national debt by 2008 and pay all the money back in the various trust funds by 2013. And you came back with unpaid for tax cuts, unpaid for wars, unpaid for prescriptive drug benefit, and all of a sudden you're back in the ditch. I mean, you can't pass a major tax cut and then find yourself a year later in the ditch and then say, well, it must be Democratic spending. No, it was an unpaid for tax cut. And I think when we get serious just about the arithmetic, we can do something. But so long as you can pass massive tax cuts without paying for them, we're going to have a problem.
You want to go next, Jack, or you want me to?
I want to go last.
Okay. You're our guest, so absolutely.
Well, you guys got me sandwiched here. And it's a good sandwich, by the way.
So you have two intervening events that have, as of late, that are really important to discuss. One, you had major tax cuts that caused deficits, and then you had COVID with a massive amount of spending as we were looking at the unknown. Place yourselves back in February, March of 2020. There's so much that we didn't know. We didn't know we were going to get a vaccine a year later. Everybody was worried whether we were going to have access to it or only the most elite and most connected folks were going to get vaccines. Our economy cratered, and we saw double-digit unemployment in a lot of our districts. So many people ended up working from home, and it was a scary year. I liken it to the end of 1941, and we're heading into World War II, and we don't know how it's going to end. This is probably the first event since World War II that affected every American, by the way. It didn't matter where you were in the country, where you were in the world, you were affected by it. And so we made a choice in a bipartisan fashion for most of those bills, both CARES 1 and CARES 2, to make sure we had funding to get our economy out of a deep, sharp recession, make sure that we had enough money so that every American had access to a vaccine, and making sure we could open our schools and do so many of these other things. And so that set the budget. Those two superseding events set the budget off course. Now, the good news is we just passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act. It was a bipartisan debt ceiling bill negotiated by President Biden and then Speaker McCarthy that led us on a path of $1.5 trillion in reduced spending. And in both the President's proposed budget and a lot of the bills coming out of the House right now, there is reduced spending. We definitely have to get off the path that was a unique situation with COVID. And I believe there'll be, as you could tell with a lot of the debates over the budget, vigorous debates over this, but at the end of the day, I think you'll see reductions at the end of this budget negotiation for the 2024 budget. And that's something that we are literally working on right now. And I appreciate everybody's concern. It's all of our concern, the fiscal responsibility and future of our nation.
Darren and I came in together in 2017, and at that point, the Republicans were in the majority in the House, and the Democrats were in the minority. So when we got a chance to get our first committee selections, usually when you're in the, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but normally if you're in the minority, you're restricted to, maybe 2 committees at most. If you're in the majority, you maybe can get a waiver for a 3rd committee, depending. That's how it was. So in our freshman year, or freshman term, I had a chance to be on 3 committees, Budget Committee being one of them. 2 years later, Darren's in the majority, I'm in the minority, so I lost a committee. So rather than sacrifice HASC and Veterans Affairs, I sacrificed my seat on the Budget Committee. Okay, here we are 4 years after that, and now we're back in the majority. So I had asked for a waiver for the 118th Congress to be able to go back onto Budget Committee. Because I believe to the very core of my being, we don't have a revenue problem in our country. We have a spending problem. We really do. And for the first time in 5 years, 4 to 5 years, the Budget Committee actually passed a budget resolution out of committee. We hadn't done that for 4 years. So that's number one. Jody Arrington, who came in with Darren and I, is the Budget Committee chair. And we are all passionate, I believe, about doing the right thing for the right reasons. But it starts with the fiscal responsibility. But in order to exercise your fiscal responsibility, you actually really need to know where the money is going today, good, bad, or ugly. And so the Budget Committee does not have subcommittees like so many of the other committees. So we just created 3 Budget Committee task forces to tackle some issues. Now, one of the task forces is on health, because we know the percentage of money that is expended on healthcare, whatever that might mean in all its entirety, that whole piece of pie. Mike Burgess, a physician from Texas, is going to chair that task force, and there's already things rolling. Another task force is on process reform within the budget process, and Rudy Yockum from Indiana is going to chair that group. And that's gets more to the mechanics of the how, the process of it. And I've been asked to chair the oversight committee on, let's just say, improper spending. And we have already put together a chart that shows where we are as far as what we're going to do. Some of the things, letters that we've sent already to inform agencies that we're very interested in what kind of pots of money they're sitting on that haven't been used, that haven't shown the return on investment of the money that was appropriated to them. When I was in uniform, I used to sit before a crowd like this and say, hey, is there anybody in this room, and this was largely all DOD folks, anybody in this room that knows where all the pots of money are? Because if you are that person, come on up here on the stage. We're going to sit together and we're going to talk because, and here's the because, and I'm going to get right down into DOD. This is a fight within the House itself amongst committees of jurisdiction. Armed Services appropriates money for a year. But we don't appropriate it. We suggested through the appropriations process, money gets appropriated for a year. So you all know, those of you with military background, or even those of you who are contractors, who are waiting outside the door on September the 15th, or thereabouts of every year, to see what extra funds were going to be expended before they expired on September the 30th. I can remember as a young flight instructor back when I got back from Vietnam, this was when the fiscal year ended June 30th, we were out flying airplanes with no reason to fly other than to burn gas, so we could get our allotment for the next year. I mean, what business would do that? But that's what we do. So the fight that we have going on right now is between Armed Services and the appropriators, because we want to try on Armed Services, maybe given a 2-year window, maybe a pilot program or two, to enable. This is not punitive to the Department of Defense, let's give the hardworking folks over there a little breathing room so they can, extend their spending out, and let's see if it gives us better results. And it all goes back to the fact that the taxpayers' dollars are what funds the government, not the printing of money, but the revenue that comes in. And is there room for improvement? Absolutely, but it's going to take some tough decisions, and it's probably going to take some shining the light on some examples of less than stellar behavior to get that changed. You can tell I have no passion for this, but I am so excited about being able to lead this oversight task force on budget, because again, I'll end with, we don't have a revenue problem, we've got a spending problem.
Let me make one quick comment on that last comment, revenue or spending. I don't think it's a revenue or spending problem, it's a balancing problem. If you want a new program, you ought to pay for it. That's the basis of PAYGO. When we passed Obamacare, there was a lot of new spending, but we raised taxes and paid for it. Now, if you didn't want to pay those taxes, you didn't get Obamacare. If you want Obamacare, you got to pay these taxes. And we decided to go for it and that was a balanced decision. A few years before, we had a prescriptive drug benefit, not paid for, just a prescriptive drug benefit. And that is how you get in trouble. You don't have PAYGO. You didn't have any way to pay for it. You had tax cuts that had not been paid for. You have a balance problem. And if you want to spend more, you have to tax more. And if you don't want to tax more, you can't spend more. That's not a revenue or spending. You've got to have a balanced approach. So if you have PAYGO, one thing that happens is the problem doesn't get worse, and as the economy grows, as it always does, you'll get more revenue coming in, but you're not spending anymore. And that's what happened to Clinton's budget. We had locked in PAYGO, and after 8 years of locked in, not making it worse, we ended up with not only a balanced budget, but a significant surplus sufficient to pay off the entire national debt.
Well, I agree absolutely with Bobby, what Bobby says. How many of you have children? Okay. How many of you as parents realized you have to maintain oversight over your children to make sure as they go and grow, they do the right thing? And there's no distance between us on this situation.
And let me tell you, there's no distance on if you're going to do the oversight and find some wasted spending, go for it.
Yeah. And take it into what you all here do for your businesses and your products you're designing. We have to, and again, the government is not a business. It will never be a business. But it has to understand some business principles of if you've got if it's your business and you got $1 to spend and you only have $1 to spend, you have to look at your business and say, do I spend it in R&D? Do I spend it in manufacturing? Do I spend it in marketing? Do I spend it in whatever it is? You don't give every department $1 just because that's what you do. That's when you're husbanding your own resources, whether they came out of your pocket or whether you had to assume some debt, you went to your bank and assumed a loan for something that you wanted to do. Again, not a core competency of government, but we, I think, on our side of the river, can do a better job of putting guardrails and guidelines in for our folks on the other side, who, by and large, for the most part, have gotten comfortable in the way that 15-year-old figures the way that they can slick mom and dad, okay, and they won't find out about it till after they're out of the house and in college. So, and I got 10 grandkids, so I know how that works.
Okay. Lots of discussion on the budget. Thank you. That was great. We're going to turn, there was a couple of questions related to workforce and education. So the first question is that there are many grants open and many opportunities open for small businesses to have opportunities. When it comes to universities, it seems that many of the larger universities are the ones that end up getting the research grants in modeling and simulation and so forth. Is there anything legislatively that could be done to encourage small colleges and universities or opportunities for them to be able to get those grants?
Well, the modeling and simulation grant program, we had to actually go out and look for potential applications because the applications hadn't come in, which wasn't a surprise because the program was there for 10 years and nobody got a grant. So I think the grants are now available and we're seeing the benefits of that. That's just in the modeling and simulation grants, and they may be talking about just research generally. That's a problem that all of the small colleges, historically black colleges and universities and other minority serving institutions complain about that all the time because they tend to be smaller and lose out to the larger colleges. There are associations of colleges that could be helpful, but on each of the grant programs, you need to identify what you think you can do and work with your congressman. We do have now something we didn't have for about over a decade, and that's what used to be called earmarks. Now there's something like community projects, or I don't know what they call them, but
Community budget funding requests.
okay. Where you can just designate funding for organizations in your district. And that can be a source of a lot of funding. Work with your local member of Congress. We've been able to get funding for colleges, job training, civic organizations. A couple of years ago, we got a couple of swimming pools funded. The next year, you can't do swimming pools. The rules change every year. But if you work with your congressman, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Sure. Congressman Soto? Whoop.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Jack, please, I insist.
Well, when Bobby talked about pay-fors, and if the large universities are getting the majority of the money, what do you think? Should we tax their endowments?
We're going to Midland now.
Well, the point is, where does, if the government's role, other than the safety and security of our citizens, if the government's role after that is to provide a level playing field, an environment where any entity can get into the game, if you will, whatever that, where that business they choose, nobody gets a free ride. So I would just suggest that the discussion should be, if you're sitting on a big pot of money and the government is doing business with you, maybe we need to relook in the 21st century how we have those relationships. I'm not saying being punitive. I'm saying creating the environment, because when we think about workforce development and we think about the fact that right now, if you're, I'm blessed, I don't talk much about my district other than you all should come. Bring your friends, bring your credit cards, your cash, whatever. Have a great time in the summer, winter, fish, snowmobile, ski, whatever you want to do. And then go back home and say, geez, we can't wait to go again next year. But in our district, we have several community colleges that with the educational model today that is being provided for our young boys and girls as they become young men and women to take a first bite of that educational apple after the K through 12 piece is that a community college, and we have, again, I'll just say we've got at least 2 of them in my district, that now they're setting themselves up to get 3 bites at the individual apple for that man or woman. They come there at the age of 18, get maybe a 2-year associate's degree or a certificate, move on. Maybe they go to finish at a 4-year school. 20 years later, when they're about 40, they're ready for a career change. That community college has programs that they're interested in, whether it be, you name it, technology, just change of professions, going from manufacturing to healthcare. And we think about how many of you here are involved in healthcare simulation. And then 20 years later, when they're about 60 and they're ready for another. But the future of education and the model that we deliver for everybody, especially those in our society who may not have had the economic advantage of a family with deep pockets that had to pay their way through school and had to figure out a way to afford that. I believe that is the future of our education. And again, nobody gets a free ride in our country because there are people who paid for that free ride with blood, sweat, tears, and in some cases, their lives to make sure that the United States of America still exists. So, not that I'm passionate about that, but I am.
Congressman Soto?
I need to talk to Jack about some legislation we have to improve access to higher education. We have several bills pending, and I think the problem that he's addressing is real. Young people cannot afford college today, and we have to come up with a solution.
Yes,
One
sir.
way for smaller colleges and universities to be able to participate is through partnerships. I'm glad you mentioned our community colleges because Valencia College locally here has partnerships with UCF to develop some of those early courses. And we have a unique program here in Florida that, if you're looking at national solutions, is very popular. It's the Direct Connect program, where you just need a GED or graduate from high school and you automatically can go to Valencia College. And if you graduate with a C average, which isn't even that great, you're automatically admitted to the University of Central Florida. And that's one of the reasons it's the largest undergraduate program in the nation, over 70,000 students. And it's probably the most popular track for my constituents to go through is to go to Valencia for 2 years. The tuition's a shade over $5,000, $6,000 a semester, and then they finish with a 4-year degree at UCF. And so it's a way for families to save money and also decide if they just want to keep their AA and move on, they could go directly into the workforce. So something to look at. The Direct Connect program might be something positive nationally because it's saving a lot of families money. But that's a way to get in other colleges like Valencia into these grant programs that, for instance, UCF was just awarded with one of these modeling and simulation grants. So just an idea locally that is very popular among Central Floridians.
So related, and you all have sort of commented on this already. I don't know if you have anything to add, but there are multiple questions on workforce. With the aging population and so forth, and jobs changing, technology changing so quickly, people are changing careers multiple times. What can be done, or what support processes are out there for apprenticeship programs, for ongoing workforce development, for working with people across the country throughout the career process? And I think, Congressman Scott, you had mentioned something about a couple of the programs, and Congressman Soto as well.
In terms of apprenticeship, we're trying to get reauthorize the National Apprenticeship Act, and the bill that's passed the House at least once or twice would provide 1 million new opportunities and expand the sectors that would be included, not just the traditional carpentry, electrician, but health, finance, and technology. We're also trying to expand the WIO, we're working on that now, the Pell Grants for job training. But the community colleges, as Darren has mentioned, Virginia has the same articulation agreement to go to community college. You can get into a 4-year institution. But they also have really great short-term programs, 6 weeks to 16 weeks, where you can get into what we call stackable credentials. Nursing is, I think, the most recognizable one, where you start off with a certified nurse assistant, go up through an LPN, RN, just with more and more education. But the community college can get you started on those kinds of credentials. There are a lot of programs, and they've studied them. People are increasing their income 25, 50, or 100% with just one of these short-term programs. Virginia pays for a lot of them. They don't have enough money to pay for all they'd like to, but that's the way that a lot of people are benefiting. Paying for those programs is a challenge, and hopefully we can get more people into those programs. I mean, the returns on it, if somebody increases their income significantly, they're paying a lot more taxes. So, we're going to be as well or better off in the long run.
Okay, Congressman Soto?
We just had Apprenticeship Day a few weeks ago and had a wonderful tour. I get surprised about this question constantly. It seems like a lot of people don't realize there's apprenticeship programs across the nation. There have been for years. Here in Orange County, we have Orange County Technical School. In Osceola, we have Osceola Tech. We had every trade you can imagine there, from iron workers to carpenters to plumbers and pipe fitters to painters to you name it. And a lot of these skills you're able to get at Valencia College, and we have more than half a dozen campuses. It was there were a lot of young people who were at this. They could start in high school or they could go after high school. We also have, with a lot of these union apprenticeship programs, they're free and you get to work on the job right away as you're going to these. But there isn't an election year that goes by that I don't see a candidate say, oh my gosh, we need apprenticeship programs. We don't have these. And I'm like, get your head out of the ground. Did you even do a basic internet search before saying that? We have apprenticeship programs. We've had apprenticeship programs for years. We continue to have them, and our young people know, but it seems like a lot of the adults don't know this. They know that they had it as a kid, but we continue to have these. The biggest challenge with the apprenticeship programs is getting the word out. So you all are part of the group today now. You can let people know. We have apprenticeship programs across the nation. Most places, including here in Central Florida, it's just a matter of, for young people who are interested in this, helping guide them into that direction. But the resources are at least here in this area, and it's something that we continue to battle the misconception that there aren't these opportunities when there are literally thousands of them every year that are available here in the region.
You know, sitting up here and having a dialogue like this, any of you ever work in the Pentagon? Do you ever hear the term GOBI land, G-O-B-I land? General Officer, bright idea. Okay, well, the point is, listening to Bobby and Darren talk, and this is something I've seen and heard from countless high schools in my district about what the curriculum should look like in high school for these boys and girls who are still trying to find themselves, if you will, and what avocation or vocation might take them to the next step. Too many of the high schools, at least in Michigan, have closed their what we would have called industrial arts departments and repurposed the space for something. And I've been asked several times, is there any way that we could maybe reinstitute somebody's phone's going off in case they haven't figured that out yet, whatever the music is. So anyway, maybe there's a way, and now I'm kind of thinking with my tongue here, for some grant programs, because if you're going to install an industrial arts facility in your high school today, it's going to look different than when I took wood shop and when I took metal shop, way back then, because you're going to have to know how to run a computer. You're going to have to know how to run different technologies that's the way you will do industrial arts going forward. That is an opportunity, I think, for us as the House of Representatives, especially on your committee, Bobby, that we could maybe jumpstart something there.
Well,
Start small, but
we stopped calling it vocational education and started calling it technical CTE. And it's different than it was then. When kids are taking shop when we're in school, it's career and technical education. When we were in school, you took shop as an alternative to the regular education, and so you just served your time and you got your diploma and went on, or you could find a vocational education. You could go right into the shipyard or somewhere else. Now, as you have pointed out, you're not going to find one job and keep it. You're going to have to be able to work computers. You're going to have to do everything else. You cannot allow people to get out of high school without having the computational arithmetic skills and the verbal skills, reading and writing, communication skills. And so if you have a career and technical education track, it has to include the basic education. And if it does include the basic education, then you're on track. We have some schools in Hampton, Virginia, that they don't call them high schools anymore. They call them academies, and each one has a different theme. maritime, healthcare, something else, where if you go into there, you'll learn welding and everything else, but you will have the basic education. And that's the key to all of these. You don't want to allow people to get tracked as they were in former generations and really miss out on an education.
And if I may add, Jack, I'm glad you mentioned it because I wasn't sure how many school districts did or didn't have technical schools. So you could choose to go to the technical high school here in Orange County or just go part-time to that and go continue with your other subjects during the morning. Or you could go after high school, or you can, if you drop out, you could come back in and get your GED there. But this is a big part of how people are trained here in Central Florida with Orange and Osceola Technical Schools and with Valencia. Because I have to scoot out early, I just wanted to thank you all for having me here today. I leave you in able hands and appreciate the debate. It's been amazing. Thank you, everyone.
See you, Darren. We're going to blame Darren now. When he's gone, it's all on him, right, Bob? It's all on him. Just ask Darren.
And I was going to start with him for the next question, too, because he's on his way to a meeting on water. And related to that, so the NTSA supports a leadership summit each year. Well, we didn't during COVID. We're going to start it again this February. And we work with the caucus to determine the topic that is most critical to them and of interest to them. We come together, we bring experts together for a one-day event to really look at what's going on in that industry and how can modeling and simulation help with some of the problems in those particular disciplines or industries. And this conference, of course, is a lot focused on the defense arena. But as we talked about, what this year's Leadership Summit will be focused on will be national resilience. And so a broader look at disaster management, at flooding, at sea level rise, climate, as well as disaster recovery, law enforcement, and all of the other things for national security. Are there particular areas that you all are passionate about that you believe modeling and simulation can really help, that maybe doesn't have as much of a focus as it could in the future?
This is the one you're having in Norfolk?
Yes. It's going to be hosted in Congressman Scott's district in Norfolk in February.
Norfolk and New Orleans are the two cities highest at risk to sea level rise. And we have a lot of assets in the area, like a naval base, that if we don't do something, we'll be underwater. And so we have a huge incentive to make sure we do something to address sea level rise. Modeling and simulation can be extremely helpful. There are models that show as the sea level rises, who gets flooded, where you can place a flood wall, where it make the most difference. There's an ongoing debate right now in one neighborhood got left out. Didn't get a flood wall, and we have to show either they need one or they don't need one. Modeling and simulation can be extremely helpful there. Evacuation routes, modeling and simulation can say the highways, do they have the capacity to do an evacuation? There are a lot of different things that you can do. I was at a conference where they talked about dealing with sea level rise with a strategy called adaptation. Adaptation, what's that? Well, adaptation means it's come and get over it, put the computers on the second floor and buy some mops, which I get, well, whatever. But the modeling and simulation can tell you where you're going to have the problems and where you aren't, and where you need to be doing something. So I'm looking forward to that conference. There's a lot that's already been done. And one thing we figured out and changed legislatively was when the Army Corps of Engineers does a city like the city of Norfolk, the federal installations don't participate. And it occurred to everybody doing the model that if you don't know what's going on at the Norfolk Naval Base, you haven't done the city of Norfolk. A lot of work is being done, and I'm looking forward to the conference to see what more can be done, because Norfolk, like I said, has an incentive to do something.
With the ability through technology to put data into whatever project you're working on, and when we think about, use the term fidelity, every day we get better at the fidelity of what we can see, what we're trying to model because of the advances in technology. And we do know that unless there's something very unique, water runs downhill. That's the way gravity works. But there are ways to look at that and say, okay, then what do we do? What can we do to modify that natural flow? An example, you mentioned New Orleans. It's been a drought kind of year down on the Delta, down in New Orleans, and they were being encroached by salt coming from the Gulf, and it was beginning to affect their water systems because of the lack of rain. So when you think about it, there is a hard instance of how do we put all of this in and say, if this is the reality of the rainfall here in New Orleans, then how do we mitigate that? So that I tell you what, you guys are sitting on the leading edge of so many good things in so many different sectors that I guess when I leave here today, I will leave with a full heart, having had the chance to be with you, but I'll leave with a list of things to look at that is going to raise the heart rate of my staff just a little when we first get back there, to say, hey, I saw this, I experienced that, because we're going to walk the floor here in a couple of, whenever we go.
Yep.
And I always come back with, a set of, of ideas that I'd like to know more about this, I'd like to know more about that. But you've got folks here who are passionately committed to what you do. And the question is, how do we spread that knowledge out? And since we were talking about skill sets earlier, I wanted you to know my wife has agreed that my retirement present to myself, whenever that happens, by the way, I'm running in 2024. This is not yet. This is not. But I want a convertible backhoe. Okay, so that you can put the different attachments, on the front and the back. And I've decided that where we live, I can't use tracks. I'm going to have to use four-wheel because to get it. But the point is, I know that the training and technology that I'm going to have to go through to really operate that the way it was designed to be operated, which gets back to, I expect to go through a simulator somewhere that, whether it's John Deere or Bobcat or whoever the Caterpillar, whoever the company is that makes it, I expect to learn how to operate that. So I'm counting on you guys. If any of you are in that market space, I want a good simulator to be able to make sure I don't hurt myself, first of all, but or destroy anything my wife doesn't want destroyed.
Well, I think in maybe one more question, and this is related really to the caucus and to the logistics of how things can occur. The caucus is reestablished with every new Congress, and many of the members stay on the caucus. Some of the members fall off, some are not reelected, but every year it's a building process for the new caucus and membership. I think we're up to about 21 members of the caucus now, but the question is, what can we do to encourage our congressperson, and what is the process to encourage them to get active in the caucus so we can broaden really the reach and the understanding of modeling and simulation to the broader congressional family.
Okay if I start, Bobby?
Go ahead.
There are hundreds and hundreds of caucuses in the House of Representatives. And I've come to learn that you can't be a member of everything. You have to find out, number one, where you might have an individual passion for something. There might be industry within your district that draws you to certain caucuses, but there's nothing that is better than guys like Bobby and Darren and myself and John Rutherford and a few others to go out and personally recruit some of our colleagues who may not understand what this is about and how it could apply to them, and see if we can light their fire. It's kind of in some ways on us, but you pretty much, I think, are in charge of developing the industry day that we have. That falls into your bailiwick, right? Whatever. The point is, companies come up and we try to drag our colleagues over to one part of the Rayburn building or Cannon or wherever to show what's going on in colleges, or the CTE is been referred to here. It truly is in DC. It's not a show and tell. It's a show and sell to enlighten our colleagues, because there may be nothing in their district right now, but there may be the opportunity, depending on what the economic environment is, that they haven't considered yet. And you need folks from both sides of the aisle to come and present that unified approach. It is not just a Republican or not just a Democrat issue.
I think there are a lot of people who have a reason to be interested. John Rutherford, one of the other co-chairs, is from this area, which has a huge emphasis on modeling and simulation. Eric Sorensen is from Illinois, who is a meteorologist, and so he's been using modeling and simulation all his professional career, so he has an interest in it. A kind word from one of the members of the caucus. We have forums we put on from time to time, and I think it's our obligation to make that interesting so people want to come. But a call from a business in a member's district, I think, will spark an interest. Like you said, there are hundreds of different caucuses and task forces. You can't belong to all of them, but if someone from your district has expressed an interest, it puts that on the front row in terms of the things you want to belong to. You don't want to go back and report to your local business, no, I didn't have time to join that caucus. You'd like to say, oh yes, I joined the caucus, it's very interesting, and I have an interest in your business. But a call from makes it a local imperative, which can be very important.
And I would encourage all of you to talk with your congressional representatives and encourage them to get in touch with these offices or get in touch with us at NTSA. We can certainly help with that. And to that end, and kind of in closing, NTSA works together, as I said, with the caucus on several things during the course of the year. Our last leadership summit was right before COVID, and it was focused on patient safety. And out of that grew a patient safety working group that has been meeting regularly for multiple years, and hence we've worked with the caucus to institute legislation to encourage and broaden the use of modeling and simulation in the patient safety arena. This year's focus, as I said, it will be on Monday, February 12th in Congressman Scott's district in Norfolk, focused on a broader area of national security and national resiliency. So I encourage you to look at that. And in July, we have a modeling and simulation expo on Capitol Hill, where we bring representatives from this audience and others to demonstrate technology and educate the broader folks, both on the House and the Senate side, about modeling and simulation. So These events are important for you to make your members aware of and for you to get involved in as well as we go forward. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you both dearly for being here. It's been amazing. They will be around here for a few minutes if you'd like to greet them, just a few minutes, and as we whisk them off to the next thing. But they will be around this afternoon on the floor, so you'll probably see them again today. Thank you all for coming, and have a great Itsec 2023.